So you guys have mentioned Zirene a couple of times. What kind of role did he play in your guys' development?
Do you want to go first?
Sure. With regards to Zirene, it was either last year or 2 years ago. 2 years ago? 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years ago at World's
Say 2 years
time.
ago again.
2 years ago.
Thank you.
1907 Fenerbahce. 2 years ago, Zirene was not involved with Worlds. So he had a lot of free time, and basically the UK Premiership was going on, Excoundrel cast it, and he gave them some feedback, I think, on Twitter, or he offered to give them some feedback if they wanted it. And me and my co-caster Jackson at the time were like, oh, that's super cool. I wonder if we could get some feedback from him as well. So we send him a message via Reddit, and we were like, would you be up for doing a VOD review with us? And so he said yes. He spent 3 hours with us one day, just going through some of the basics, getting a feel for what our casting was like. And then he was like, if you want to do more, feel free. And so I took advantage of that, and I booked weekly 1 hour VOD review sessions with him for like 3 months, I think, because Worlds was going on, and then it went up to All-Stars. Like, he just had more free time than he normally would. And so I just took advantage of that as much as I could. And yeah, it was like every Wednesday at 7 p.m. he and I would meet and talk for an hour. I had a VOD that we would go through, or it would be various stuff. And he just taught me a lot of the fundamentals of casting that I didn't know about. Like, a lot of casters, especially color casters, won't know about narrative, about telling the player's story, about how they came onto the scene, how they've done within the scene, their legacy. And it's like, that was an entirely new world of casting to me, because I was like, oh, I can actually talk about the people playing the game rather than just the game itself. And you can talk about team narratives and the game narrative. And I was like, oh, this is crazy. So he taught me a lot of the basic concepts I never had any idea about. And that instantly leveled me up significantly. That's why I had such rapid growth within such a short amount of time, just because he was willing to invest the time. But at the same time, I was willing to put the time in too. Yeah. And I think that's something that he really valued, because it wasn't just me asking him to spoon feed me. It was like, this is the stuff I want to go over this week. Do you have time to sit with me for an hour? And I think he just respected the fact that I was willing to put time in, and I was valuing his time back, you know, and obviously it eventually paid off, and now we work together.
I think like you're so willing to invest time and to open yourself up to criticism, and it's a really positive attitude, the way you go into things and the amount of time you put into things. So.
Aww, look you, cutie.
You hit me again, we'll see how that ends up for you. Alpha.
Yeah, know your place. Now talk about your relationship with Zirene.
Yeah, it was good. We had this Skype group. I kind of came in a little bit on the down low. That's the expression, right? I was a little bit under the radar because I was doing like other stuff a lot of the time. So when
you were between places.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. I feel like I really lived a dual life throughout med school. It was kind of like I wasn't really a med student. I wasn't really a caster. It was just every now and again I'd kind of step into one set of boots, and then I'd put my different hat on, and that's a lot of different metaphors that I'm mixing up there. But I'd be very much between the two roles, and every now and again I'd reach out to Zirene and say, oh, what do you think of this cast? Or I was looking at trying to develop this sort of idea, how would you do that? And he was incredibly helpful through it all, and I think he helped all of us a lot. Everyone who was in the Skype group now is in a role in esports, like whether it be backstage or hosting or casting. We've all developed quite nicely because of the help that Zirene put in.
I mean, you have to think like Captain Flowers. He worked with me. Yeah. He worked with you, and a lot of the amateur casters that have found success as well. He also worked with, and like he doesn't have the time now because he was a relatively new caster back then. But the biggest respect I have for Zirene that I try to emulate now is that I will put time into someone who's willing to put the time in. And I just think that's because I've had many casters reach out to me and be like, hey, can we do some VOD reviews? Can we talk about stuff? And I'm like, sure. They do one VOD review with me, and then I never hear back from them again. And I tell them at the start, like, I'm not going to babysit you. I'm not going to message you every week for VOD reviews. It's all on you. I'm a resource you can use, but you know, you have to be the one to use it.
Yeah,
And-
it's the idea of reaching out that we talked about earlier on.
Yeah.
Like if I've had a couple of people come up to me, and I think part of it is my VOD review style, because I tell them at the start, I'm blunt, I'm hypercritical. If I think something is good, I'll say, oh, that was good, and then move on. If I think something's bad, I will tell you the 10 reasons that is bad in that moment.
10?
Okay, you might do 20. I don't know.
I would be like, you know, this could do with a little bit of work rather than, here is my list of criticisms.
I think that's
Allow
where
me
we're
to crush your confidence, weakling.
But you kind of have to crush people. Like I do it to myself. Okay, this is our difference in styles, because I think to become a better caster, you have to melt yourself down. You have to break yourself down to the key components of your cast, and you have to work on those and build that foundation.
Fine.
And to do that, the people who come to me have to realize that they're not hot shit. They have to realize that the things that they say aren't as amazing as they think they are.
Okay.
And I do this with myself. Like, we both know that I'm hypercritical of myself.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think
cast.
many casters are hypercritical of themselves.
Yeah, but then if they're going to come to a VOD review with me, they should be willing to be criticized.
Yeah, of course. I think everyone should always be willing to be criticized, but I think also you have to bear in mind the state of which a lot of amateur casters are at, and it's always about evaluating, right? Because a great conversation I had with Deficio is eventually you get to a point where you have all the core fundamentals, you do a good job in general, and then everything you're trying to improve is always like a 5% increment.
Yeah.
Every time you want to improve something, like the amount of effort you have to put in to the amount of gains that you get is like huge effort, very little gains. And that's what separates like the really good casters from the great ones. That's why Deficio is where he is, because he has put so much extra effort into pushing that needle just ever so slightly over many, many, many years. And eventually it all culminates into, oh, you've actually pushed the needle pretty significantly. It just took you many years to get there. And I think like, that's the thing. Like, that's why I'm not hypercritical, because I think that you have to get people to a point where they need to fill up the bar first. Okay. I think you need to have that. You're now a well-rounded caster that has the core fundamentals of narrative, being able to follow the game, being able to talk about the players, whatever it is, but you just have to fill that core bar, and then you start getting hypercritical when you want to push the needle more, when you want to gain those 5%, because that's when you are looking at micro interactions with your colleague. That's when you're looking at your word verbiage, when you're trying to break something down, right? Like, there are so many, like, positivity, negativity, bias, all these other things, like...
You know a lot about bias.
Yeah, I know, right? So it's, I think that it depends on the state of the caster and where they're going. That's why I disagree.
No, I can understand that. I think that the casters that tend to come to me are people who've been around for like 6 months to a year, where they should have those fundamentals. And if they don't, then I'm probably a little bit nicer with them. But a lot of the time I get people who are like, I'm part-time casting, I've done, you know, these few gigs in the UK, let me try and improve. And it's like, okay, let's break you down.
Step 1, you're not hot shit.
Exactly. I'm gonna put that on a title.
You can put it on a t-shirt or something.
Step 1, you're not hot shit.
For more league interviews and analysis, subscribe to our channel. You can also find stats, discussions, and more on our website and mobile app at blitzesports.com.